Hello, I'm De-Esser. Today I'm just going to show you how I process the audio for a simple YouTube video. So this is just one where if I'm just literally just talking, it's like an interview thing. So not including anything where I'm doing a guitar tutorial or anything like that, because the audio settings that I use then are more complicated. If I'm doing a simple video, all I will do is I will record the audio on my camera using this Rode microphone, and the sound goes straight into the camera, and that is it. That is how I capture it, through that microphone into the camera. If it's simple, I will just do the audio processing in Premiere Pro. I won't bother doing it in Pro Tools. On a more complicated video, I'll do it properly and I'll go into Pro Tools and I'll go through a much lengthier process. If that's something that you want me to do a video on, please do let me know in the comments below. I did try making that video once before, but it went wrong. So I'm happy to have another go at it though. Okay, in Premiere then, the first thing that I will do is I'll just edit the video and get the video pretty much so that it's finished. And then I will do the audio settings afterwards. It's just part of the process that I do. So I go through the process of doing all my edits. And then once I've done all my edits, what I want to do is A1 is where all of the audio from that camera came from. So I'm going to press Shift and then D. And that's going to give me some little crossfades over each of the clips. That gives me some little crossfades across each of the clips, you can see. And that's just a quick way to crossfade all of the clips and just quickly make sure that there's no pops or glitches or anything like that happening. It's just a good practice to do that. Then I go into the audio mixer. So the mixer's just up here at the top. And if you can't already see it, there's a little arrow at the top that you click, which is there, and that expands so that you can see the VST plugins. The first plugin that I'm going to use is an EQ. I'm going to use the FabFilter EQ. I think that the FabFilter stuff's really good. It really shows you what you're doing. As well as being able to hear what you're doing, you can see what you're doing as well. And I think for people who are beginners and things, that's really useful. I find it useful myself anyway. So without the EQ, but before we carry on with that, please do like the video and please do subscribe. And then I'm just going to put a high pass in. What I'm doing, it helps with the algorithm and just helps me to be able to continue making this content. And I'm listening really. I don't want the high pass to really make that much of a difference. It's just a way of cleaning up the audio. I get rid of any low rumble or anything like that that's getting in the way before I do my next stage of noise reduction. The next stage of noise reduction that I do is using the RX voice denoise. Where is it? So it's Isotope RX6 voice denoise. This actually comes free with Pro Tools, with the Pro Tools subscription, or it's in the RX Elements pack, which is one of the cheaper ones. So it shouldn't make that big a difference on this one because I didn't have the heating on and I am in a recording studio, so it's fairly quiet to start with. So I'll bypass it. Thanks. Let's have a look at the multiple camera switcher then. I'm using a Blackmagic Atom Mini Pro ISO. And then with it in. Now, the Atom Mini will actually do what you want this to do. It's not a huge difference when listening to it now. Perhaps I'll go back and switch this in and out after I've compressed the voice a little bit. You might hear it a little bit more. Certainly if the heating was on here at the studio, you would hear the difference. And this plugin actually cleans up the noise of the heating being on if I do a video and I accidentally leave the heating on and press record. I've been like, oh no, there's this horrible hum in the background. I switch this plugin in and it's absolutely fine. It sorts that out completely. The next thing that I do is I compress. I'm noticing that when I did this video that I've obviously not set the volume correctly on my microphone. Very naughty. I was in a bit of a rush when I was doing it. So I'm going to use a compressor anyway. I would always compress my voice at this point. And that's about 300 quid. I'm going to set the attack quite slow and I'm going to set the release quite slow. So you can see the attack's like 10 milliseconds, something around there. The release is around 200 milliseconds. More expensive. It has quite a few more features that I talk about in another video. And I'm going to stick the gain up by quite a bit actually, just I want to get a lot more volume. So one of the great things about the Atom as well is when it's not plugged in, it doesn't show up on your list of cameras. So you can see now that the volume's come up, but my voice is being controlled by the compressor, so it's making it more even, so that when I say something a little bit quieter, and then I maybe say something a bit louder, that there's not as big a dynamic range, not as big a difference between those. So we call that compression. It's taking the higher volume stuff and bringing the volume of that down, but then we're bringing the volume up as a whole. So the actual dynamic range has been compressed rather than it being like this. It's like this, louder, but the loudest bits don't get louder, if that makes sense. Some great videos. The FabFilter videos about compression are some of the best videos on YouTube, in my opinion. Same with their videos on EQ, and there's a video about sample rates, which is absolutely brilliant. There's no better way of explaining it than the way that they explain it on that video. Cameras, which is one of my gripes about. I'll switch this in and out. Webcam utility with Canon, which is that when it's not plugged in, it still shows up as a device, which means that if I switch through cameras using the shortcut, the main thing that you'll notice is that it's louder, but it does also give a bit more presence in the voice. It means that there's a little bit more command to the way that the voice sounds. I'm now going to just switch this voice denoise in and out and see if you hear the difference of that now that the voice is a bit louder. Command-Shift-N, it still comes up and it shows this blank page now because the camera isn't plugged in, which is really irritating. It kind of means that I can't just switch quickly through my cameras using that shortcut because there's a blank camera. I've actually uninstalled that utility from the... So it's a subtle difference, but there is a difference there. The next thing that I do is De-Esser the voice. So again, I'm going to use the FabFilter De-Esser. You tend to find, I think it was Andrew Sheps or someone like that said that the amazing thing with the FabFilter De-Esser is that you load it up with the default settings and it's pretty much right on the computer for that very reason. So if I switch to the Atom Mini Pro ISO, and can you see here, this is just turning these down. So every time I s and t and all those horrible sounds, it just turns those down, which means again that I can get the voice a bit louder without those sounds really poking through and irritating people. And I now have a multiple camera switcher that I can switch just with these buttons that are on the Atom. So I've actually got a GoPro, which is set. I've just turned it up a little bit there because it really was a little bit too quiet. I don't know why I didn't gain the microphone up a bit higher. It was probably set from a previous video that I did where I was recording something that was louder and I'd just been an idiot and haven't done it. So really the first tip should be to set your volume correctly in your microphone. That said, it's probably better to turn it up now than it would be for it to clip, because if it was too loud, I can't really recover that. I can't go back. Once it's clipped, but turning it up and making it a bit louder is very easy, and it doesn't really introduce any noise like it used to back in the olden days. I'm now going to use another EQ, and this is something that I do a lot in all my production. I will shape with an EQ going into the compressor, so I get rid of anything that I don't want, and then after compression I bring up the things that I do want. So in this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to boost probably around 80 hertz up here, and that's this wide shot that you can see here, and I usually notch a little bit of that out as well. So I've got like a wide thing but with a notch so that I don't get this sort of sound that I would get if I just boosted there. I use this camera that's without that, and you can see it's recording this and it's outputting to the Atom at the same time. It's a great camera. So that's without this, and that is usually, to be honest with you, that is usually in on my guitar and then with it, and I just switch it on and off as I need it, because otherwise it just runs the battery down. And I tend to boost around 3K, I'll just listen to where I want it. That just gives a little bit of presence. I've then got this other camera here, which is close in on my left hand. And again, without the EQ. And I sometimes plug my iPad in to input 4 and use that. But you can see, maybe you can see, I don't know, that when I'm talking on this camera, it isn't at the same time. So you can see I'm only pushing like a dB, 1.5 dB. The most I would ever push is 3 dB, and that'd be probably very rare that I would do anything what I would consider that extreme. Okay. I've also got some backing music that I've put in. So I use my own music for backing. This is from a tune called Alive from my album, The Dreams That Keep Me Awake. Do check my album out on Spotify, please. You can also listen to the track Alive here, if that interests you. So what I do with that is I just put it on 2 tracks at the bottom here, and then I just overlap them where one finishes, it just starts it running again, and I just make sure that they're about the right time. The problem, sometimes I get lucky and the track just finishes in a nice time. This one hasn't really happened. So what I'm going to have to do is just put a little crossfade in at the end, a little fade out, should I say. So I could just use the Command D and a fade thing, but I've also got this bar here, which is a bit like clip gain in Pro Tools or in a Pro DAW. What I can do is I can add a little nodule there by pressing Command and clicking, and then another one here, and I'm just going to shape a little fade out. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. See you soon. And then there's a little crossfade to 0 at the end there, so that seems to work. So now with the backing music, this week I'm just going to show you how I have multiple cameras set up in Zoom. I do it in more than one way, and there's a few simpler ways to do it, and then there's more complicated ways to do it. And I'll show you the benefit. I don't want the backing music to be too loud, but I do want people to be able to hear it. I like my music. Bits of doing it the more complicated ways. Sometimes simpler is better though, I suppose. Yeah, that seems about right. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to do then is I'm going to put a limiter on this. So you've probably guessed it. I use the FabFilter limiter. I use this in mastering as well. It's probably the best limiter out there as far as I'm concerned. I know like loads of other people, loads of famous mastering engineers use this as well. It's ridiculously good. The FabFilter stuff's great. It's relatively affordable. If you are in education in any way, there's fantastic educational discounts for it as well. It's not sponsored or anything like that. I wish I was sponsored by it. That'd be great, but it isn't. I just think it's really good. So I'm just going to use the dynamic algorithm this time for this. The simplest way. Now, the limiter needs to be set up in a certain way. You need your output to be set to -1. Now, that is the peak output of the limiter. And that means that anything that goes above -1 is going to be turned down by the limiter. It's a brick wall limiter. It can't get any louder than -1. It's really important that it's -1 because if you set it higher than that, there is a chance that when Premiere exports your video and it encodes the audio into an MP3, that you'll get what's called intersample peaking, which is a type of distortion essentially. In other words, it's just not going to sound very good potentially. So make sure that you set it to -1. There's an amazing FabFilter video about all of these things. And there's also my friend Paul Maunder did a video about intersample peaking. If I find it, I'll link it above. I think it was on Facebook though that he did it. It was a really great video. Check out Paul Maunder on YouTube though. He's a phenomenal person to follow. Great. So this is basically, I'm just going to turn it up. Everything's going to get turned up a little bit, up to the brick wall. I'm looking for it to be around -14 LUFS, which is loudness units full scale, and that is an averaging way of looking at audio. I've mentioned in previous videos, and that is the same level that you'd want something to be at for Spotify if it was going on Spotify. It's not the level that you'd master something to for CD, but that's a different matter. Is to just use your phone as another camera. So within Zoom, if I have my phone set as a contact, then I can invite myself to the call, and then it will ring on my phone so I can answer it. Then I'll have to let myself. So looking at this, I'm kind of thinking, right, I might just compress the voice a little bit more at this stage. Myself into the meeting, obviously. If you hold Shift, by the way, and open another plugin in Premiere, it's the same as Pro Tools. You can get both plugins. And I'm going to cancel. It says cool using internet audio. I'm going to cancel that because I don't want to include the sound because it'll start a feedback loop. So now I actually have another camera in Zoom. So if I put this into a gallery view, there's now and we're hitting sort of -15, -16. That's loud enough for me. I think that that's okay for a YouTube video where I'm just talking. That's okay, really. There's quite a lot of gaps in what I'm saying, so it's not constant like music would be. So each of those gaps is silence, essentially. So I think that doing it to sort of around -16 is okay. The units for YouTube used to be -15. They've now brought it up in volume to -14. If you're in the ballpark, that's fine. The problem is without it, if I take this back down, two cameras, it's quite cool actually because I can actually use it to look around the room. So we're actually only at -22 without it. So then I'm sticking 8 dB of gain, 8.5. Here we go. If I flip the camera so that I'm looking through the front camera, so I can now use it to look over here. There's a mixing desk there. So say if I was doing a lesson about the mixing desk, I could actually go over to the mixer and that seems about right to me, yeah. If you have any questions about this, please do let me know in the comments below. Do like the video and do subscribe to the channel. I hope you found this video useful. I can do more content about things like this, about how I make my videos, if that's something that you find interesting. Do let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.